She was running to another man while I worked 3 jobs, and that's when she lost everything. I always thought that if you worked hard enough, life would eventually pat you on the back and say, "Good job, champ, keep going, you are doing everything right." So I worked 3 jobs sometimes for if someone called in sick and needed coverage, because I wanted my wife Emma to have everything she dreamed of. We met at 16, two clueless kids with big ideas and even bigger hearts, and by 23 we stood at a tiny courthouse smiling like we had just discovered the cheat codes to life. By 32 I was still smiling, or at least trying to, but the truth was that something in our house had started to feel colder even when the heater was running nonstop. Most nights I came home after a triple shift smelling like coffee and cold air and exhaustion, and Emma would be on the couch with her phone glued to her hand, barely looking up as I walked in. She used to greet me with this loud, "Hey, you made it," but now it was more like a quiet, distracted MHM without lifting her eyes. I told myself she was tired too, that maybe work was rough on her, or she was going through something she had not figured out how to tell me. But deep down in the place where intuition whispers, even when you do not want to hear it, I knew something was off. I tried to talk to her a few times asking how her day went, but her answers were short and vague, like she was reading off the back of a cereal box and not talking to the man she had been with for 16 years. Still, I kept working, kept paying bills, kept bringing home her favorite snacks, because love is not about grand gestures, it is about showing up even when you are tired. At least that is what I believed back then. One afternoon she said she needed to run to the store and forgot her phone on the kitchen counter, something she never did, because that phone had become basically an extra limb. I stared at it for a long moment, debating with myself like some exhausted courtroom lawyer, and finally, I picked it up, not out of jealousy, but out of fear that the thing I had been sensing was real, fear that our story had taken a turn I had not signed up for. When the screen lit up, I saw messages right there on the lock screen, messages from a name I had never heard before with emojis we had stopped using years ago. My stomach tightened, but my hands were steady, which surprised me. Maybe because part of me already knew what I was going to find once I opened the phone. Still, I swiped and started reading, and with every line the room seemed smaller and quieter. They had been seeing each other not once, not twice, but more times than I could count, and the messages were not vague, they were clear, confident, like they did not expect to be caught. I should have felt rage or heartbreak or something explosive, but instead everything inside me settled into this calm, cold clarity, like a lake right before a storm. It was the moment I realized that the person I had been breaking my back for had already checked out of our marriage a long time ago. And right then, instead of clenching my fists or shouting at the empty room, I said one quiet sentence to myself, a sentence that would shape everything that came next. If she thinks she can play me, she picked the wrong man. I put the phone back exactly where she had left it, screen dark, face down, like nothing had happened, and then I just stood there in the kitchen listening to the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the cheap wall clock that had seen more of our marriage than any therapist ever would. It felt like standing backstage right before the curtain opened. You know the show is about to start, but you are the only one who has read the new script for the first time in a long. While I did not feel tired, I felt awake, very awake. On the drive to one of my night shifts, I kept replaying everything in my head, the double shifts, the ignored messages from me, the nights she said she was staying late with friends, the times she suddenly cared a lot about how she looked just to go supposedly buy groceries. It was like someone turned the lights on in a room I thought I knew by heart, and suddenly I saw all the furniture was in different places. I could have screamed or confronted her right away, but what would that do? Give her time to rewrite the story, make herself the victim, say it just happened, say I was never home and she was lonely. No, I was not going to give her that kind of stage. The thing about working 3 jobs is that you learn discipline, you learn patience, you learn how to keep moving even when your body wants to shut down. So I decided to treat this like another shift, a hard one, but still a shift with a clear goal. Step 1, understand exactly what I was dealing with. Step 2, make a plan. Step 3, execute it calmly. I was not interested in drama, I was interested in truth and consequences. Over the next week, I watched her with new eyes, same house, same woman, different filter. She smiled at her phone more than she smiled at me, her thumbs moving fast while mine were busy holding boxes, coffee cups, and steering wheels. Twice she said she was going to her friend Lily and came back with that distracted, floating look, like her mind was still somewhere else. I checked with Lily casually a few days later during a grocery run, and her confused face told me everything I needed to know. Emma had not been at her place in months. I started gathering quiet proof, not because I needed it to know the truth, but because I knew one day soon there would be paperwork and lawyers, and suddenly everyone would care about what could be shown, not just what could be felt. I took photos of some of the messages on her phone. When she showered, I noted dates and times. I made a little folder on my old laptop titled Car Maintenance, because if she was going to hide a whole relationship, I figured I could hide a few files. While I was doing that, I was also doing something else, something much more important. I was studying our life like an accountant. Who paid for what, whose name was on which account, which bills were automatic, which assets were technically mine, and which ones were for both of us. When you are in love, you say things like what is mine is yours, and it sounds romantic, but when betrayal walks into the room, that sentence suddenly comes with fine print, and I was done signing things without reading the terms. One evening after a long shift, her dad called me just to check in, or at least that is what he thought he was doing. He asked how work was, how I was holding up, and I do not know why, but in that moment the words almost slipped out, "Your daughter is cheating on me," but I swallowed them. Not yet. I thought not until I have everything lined up, because when this truth comes out it is going to land like a piano, not like a thrown pillow. So I laughed, talked about overtime and bills and life. And when I hung up, I realized something important. Emma had not only cheated on me, she had underestimated me. She thought of me as the exhausted guy who would accept anything as long as the mortgage was paid. And right there in that quiet, tired kitchen, I made myself a promise. I was going to walk away from this marriage with my head high, my dignity intact, and my future still mine. And she was going to learn what it felt like to lose the one person who would have done anything for her. The funny thing about living with someone while knowing they are lying to you is that everything becomes strangely quiet even when the house is full of sound. Emma would walk around humming, making coffee, scrolling on her phone, and I would nod along acting normal while my mind ran calculations like a tired accountant who suddenly realized half the numbers never added up. I was not hurt anymore, just sharply aware, like someone had cleaned my glasses after years of smudges. I knew the right moment would come, the moment to let the truth unfold with maximum clarity and minimum chaos. So I kept observing her, and she kept underestimating me, which honestly made my job easier. She would hide her phone screen, tilt it away, pretend she was texting coworkers, but the smile, she had a new one, a smile I had not seen in years, gave her away every time. It was the kind of smile people get when they feel chosen. Except she had forgotten she had already been chosen by me 7,000 times over, through every shift, every bill, every tired morning. But I guess some people get addicted to attention like it is oxygen. One Thursday evening, I came home earlier than usual because one of my jobs cut a shift, and I figured I would surprise her with takeout, her favorite sandwiches from the place across town. Instead, I walked into the living room and saw her sitting there on the couch, talking on speaker, completely absorbed, not even noticing I had opened the door. It was him, the mystery man with the smooth voice and the fake confidence of someone who thinks he is invisible. I stood there silently, letting the moment sink in, because sometimes the universe hands you proof on a silver platter. She finally noticed me and nearly dropped her phone, switching off speakers so fast she almost threw the thing across the room. She said, "Hey, you are home early," and I just smiled, the kind of smile that people misunderstand. All the time, I handed her the takeout and said, "Long day, figured we could eat together," and she nodded stiffly, clearly uncomfortable, as if guilt had suddenly developed weight. That night, when she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table going through the last steps of the plan I had been building quietly for weeks. I reviewed our joint accounts, the house paperwork, the savings I had put away, the items technically purchased by me alone, the insurance details, slow, steady, precise. It was not revenge. It was preparation, because when someone breaks the foundation you spent more than a decade building, you do not try to fix it with duct tape, you rebuild somewhere else. The next day, I took a small step. I visited her parents under the excuse of dropping off a toolbox her dad had lent me. They had known me since I was a teenager, awkward, nervous, holding their daughter's hand like it was the greatest honor in the world. And they welcomed me with warmth like always, but they also noticed something in my face. Her mom asked if I was sleeping enough, and I almost laughed because sleeping had nothing to do with anything anymore. I did not tell them everything, not yet, but I asked a few careful questions like, "Has Emma seemed different to you? Or has she mentioned new friends?" And they exchanged a look, the kind of look that says we have noticed things too, but did not want to bring them up. Her dad said she had been distant lately, hard to talk to, always on her phone, always somewhere else even when she was in the room. I nodded, storing away that confirmation like another piece in a growing puzzle. Driving home, I felt something I had not felt in a long time, a sense of direction. It was like the fog was finally lifting, and the road ahead was clear, not easy, but clear. I was not going to explode or crumble or beg. I was going to do what I do best, work steadily, and finish the job. And when the final moment came, she would look at me expecting anger, and instead, she would meet calm certainty, the kind of certainty that says I am done carrying what is not mine. The next week felt like living inside a chess match, except I was the only one who realized the game had even started. Emma moved through the house, distracted, floating half present, half somewhere else. And I played my role, the calm, steady husband who asked simple questions and nodded at simple answers. If acting paid as well as my night job, I would have quit all 3 positions right then, because honestly, I was giving an award. Winning performance. But behind that calm exterior, the plan kept taking shape piece by piece. Marriage is not just about love, it is also a legal partnership with rules, numbers, timelines, and signatures. And I knew that if she wanted to gamble our history on a man she barely knew, then she could face the consequences of the paperwork just as confidently. I did not want to destroy her life, but I was done financing someone who treated loyalty like an optional subscription. One afternoon I caught her laughing at her phone, a real laugh, the kind she had not used with me in years, and I remember thinking how strange it was that something so small could feel like a mile marker on a road you never meant to travel. She stopped laughing when she realized I was there, and quickly changed the screen, then gave me a smile as thin as printer paper. I told her I was heading to my evening shift, And she nodded, not even asking when I would be back, which used to be her favorite question. On my break that night, I sat outside behind the building with a notebook, planning the final steps, the accounts to separate, the documents to copy, the timing to choose. Everything had to be done in a single clean sweep, one motion, no hesitation. I know some people think betrayal should be met with fire and shouting, but I believed in strategy, not spectacle. I wanted stability on the other side, not chaos. 2 days later, her brother Mark called me just to say he was nearby and wanted to grab a quick coffee. He was younger than us, but smart, sharp, and always able to read a situation faster than most. We sat in his truck, drinking drive-through coffee, and he asked how things were in a tone that already assumed the answer would not be great. I looked at him for a long second, and then told him quietly what I had found, not with drama, not with tears, just facts laid out like items on a table. His face went still, then tired, then angry, but not at me. He shook his head, saying he had suspected something for a while, that she had become distant, even with the family, dodging calls, skipping dinners, canceling plans with flimsy excuses. He apologized over and over, but I stopped him because it was not his fault, and honestly, I felt strangely relieved to finally say the truth out loud to someone. When he asked what I was going to do, I told him that I had a plan, and that it would be clean, fair, and final. No yelling, no scenes, no public spectacle, just a simple truth presented with every piece of proof and every legal detail in place. He nodded and said, "Whatever you need, I am here," and he meant it, and in that moment I realized something important. Her own family saw me more clearly than she did, and they respected the work I had put into this marriage, even if she no longer cared. That night, I went home feeling calm, almost steady enough to forget what was happening, but then I walked inside and saw her sitting on the couch, smiling softly at her phone again, and any lingering hope that this was a misunderstanding just dissolved. She had chosen her road, and I was choosing mine, and mine led forward, not sideways, not backward, forward. The morning everything truly shifted started out painfully normal, which honestly made it feel even more surreal. I woke up before the sun, like always, brewed coffee, packed my work bag, and moved through the house quietly so she could sleep in. For years, that was my routine, a kind of silent love language. She never really noticed, but I kept doing it anyway, because that is what commitment used to mean to me. By the time she finally walked into the kitchen, yawning and scrolling through her phone, I already had everything figured out. She gave me a distracted good morning without looking up, and I realized how long it had been since she actually looked at me, studied my face, asked how I was really doing. It hit me, then not painfully, just heavily, like picking up a box you have carried so many times you forget how much it weighs. I watched her pour cereal with one hand while typing with the other, and all I could think was, this is not the woman I married, not anymore. I drove to work, but I was not thinking about clock schedules or customers. I was thinking about timing, the precise moment when everything needed to be set into motion. The papers were ready, the accounts were separated, the proof was organized, clean, clear, undeniable. All that remained was choosing the right day, and I had already circled one on the calendar quietly in my mind. Friday evening, the one time she was always home because she liked to unwind from the week. I figured it was poetic in a way, ending things on the same day most people looked forward to. During lunch break, I called her parents, not to expose her yet, but to ask if they could meet me that weekend. Her mom agreed immediately, and her dad asked in a worried tone if everything was all right. I told them we could talk in person, and they understood, which told me they already sensed something was very wrong. Parents always know, even when they do not want to admit it. Later that night, when I came home, she was in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, smiling at her phone again. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her, watching someone else, and she did not even realize I was there until I said her name. She jumped slightly, locked her phone, and gave me a thin, forced smile that did not match the one she had used a second earlier. I told her I was going to shower, and she nodded, going right back to her screen the moment I turned away. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror, steam rising around me, and I felt something shift internally. Not anger, not grief, just a kind of finality, like closing a book you know you will never open again. The man who walked into that shower was exhausted, loyal, hopeful. The man who walked out was steady, focused, and done choosing someone who would not choose him back. That night, while she slept, I sat at the kitchen table one more time, reviewing every detail, making sure nothing was messy, rushed, or emotional. I did not want her hurt. I wanted her accountable. Those are not the same thing. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, simple, calm, controlled. Then I closed the folder and leaned back in the chair, breathing quietly in the dark. Friday arrived with the kind of calm that almost feels suspicious, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting for me to take the first step. I went to work like usual, greeted people, carried boxes, fixed small problems, and moved through the day with a certainty I had not felt in months. Every hour that passed tightened the point of no return, but instead of fear, I felt something closer to relief. When you carry a truth long enough, setting it down feels like freedom. When I got home that evening, the sun was low, and the house was quiet except for the faint sound of her typing in the living room. She did not look up when I walked in, just gave a quick, distracted hey. If this had been a normal day, maybe that would have stung, but today I was beyond the point of expecting anything from her. I set my bag down, washed my hands, and stood there for a moment listening to the small, familiar sounds of a home that no longer felt like mine. I walked into the living room, and she finally looked up confused like she had not expected me to stand there doing nothing, just watching her. I said her name quietly and gestured toward the dining table, and something about my tone made her eyebrows tighten. She stood up, phone still in hand, and followed me, sitting across from me with the kind of posture people use when they know something serious is about to happen. I kept my voice steady, calm, controlled. I told her I knew about the messages, I knew about the man, and I knew it had been going on for months. She froze mid-breath, her face draining, then flushing, then settling into something that looked like panic mixed with disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out, just a shaky breath and a small excuse forming on her lips. I raised a hand, gently, not angry, just done, and said, "You do not need to explain, I already understand everything." She stared at me, maybe expecting shouting, maybe expecting accusations, but I offered neither. Instead, I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward her, explaining what it contained: dates, messages, screenshots, and the legal path forward. Her hands trembled as she opened it, flipping through each page like she could undo them by looking fast enough. I told her I had already separated the accounts, handled the property documents, and scheduled a meeting for us with a mediator. I said it calmly, like someone reading a weather report, and that seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. She whispered, "Why are you doing this?" in a voice so small I barely recognized it. And I answered, "Because you made your choice long before I made mine. I am just finishing what you started." She tried to say she was confused, she was lonely, she thought I did not care anymore, and all the usual lines people pull out when they realize consequences are real, but I stayed steady. I told her I had worked 3 jobs for years, I had given everything I had, including the parts of myself no one sees, and if that was not enough for her, then nothing ever would be. I said, "I am not here to fight with you, I am here to end this with dignity, mine, not yours." When she finally realized there was no argument that could save her story, she started crying quietly, not dramatic, not loud, just small broken sounds, like someone realizing the bridge behind them had burned, and they were the one holding the match. I did not comfort her, not out of cruelty, but because that was no longer my role. She had dismissed me from it long ago. I stood up, gently gathered my keys, and said, "Her parents want to talk to you tomorrow. They know something is wrong, and I will tell them everything if you do not." Her eyes widened with fear at that, and I realized she understood exactly what losing their respect meant. I walked toward the door, feeling oddly light, steady, almost peaceful. As I stepped outside, I knew one thing clearly: the hard part was over, the truth was out, and the clean break had finally begun. I drove to a small overlook outside town, the kind of place people go when they need a breath that does not taste like the life they're trying to leave behind. The sky was fading into that soft blue that only lasts a few minutes, and for the first time in months, I did not feel rushed or tired or pulled in every direction. I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting the quiet settle over me like a blanket I had forgotten existed. Peace is a strange thing. It usually shows up right after everything falls apart. My phone buzzed a few times, but I ignored it. I already knew who it was: Emma, calling, texting, trying to negotiate with the situation she had created. I was done being the one who fixed things while she broke them. Instead, I watched the lights of the town flicker on one by one like a slow reset button, and I felt something close to pride. Not the loud kind, the quiet, grounded kind that comes from choosing yourself even when it scares you. Eventually, I headed home, but the air inside the house felt different, lighter, almost empty in a way that was not sad, more like a road finally cleared of traffic. Emma was sitting at the dining table, still staring at the folder like it might rearrange itself into a happier ending if she looked long enough. She had stopped crying, her face looked tired, older somehow. Maybe honesty ages people faster than time does. She whispered, "Can we talk?" and I nodded, but gently told her nothing would change the path already set. She tried again, saying she could fix things, she could make it right, she could end it with the other man. And there was a time when those words might have cracked me open, but now they just felt like someone offering to repair a house after they had already sold it to a stranger. I told her calmly, "This is not about him, it is about choices and patterns and the fact that I cannot stay in a life where I am treated like an option." She looked at me with this stunned expression like she never expected me to walk away fully, and I realized she had always counted on my loyalty to hold me hostage. But loyalty is not supposed to be a cage, and I was done being locked inside a life built on my effort and her excuses. I told her parents wanted to see her tomorrow, and that she should be honest with them because they deserved the truth too. She winced at that, a small flinch that told me exactly how deep her fear of disappointing them ran. In a way, I knew that moment might hurt her more than losing me, and strangely, that did not feel cruel, it felt accurate. Consequences are rarely comfortable, but they are always educational. That night I slept on the couch, not because of anger, but because the bedroom felt like a museum of a life that did not belong to me anymore. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet, steady sound of a house that had finally stopped lying. I thought about the younger versions of us, 2 16-year-olds who thought love alone could solve anything, and I wished them well, but I did not wish to be them again. When morning came, I left early, giving her space to face her family. I did not plan to be there when that conversation happened because some truths need to land without interference. As I drove away, I felt the weight of years lifting inch by inch like someone slowly loosening a too tight rope. The story was not over yet, but the ending had already chosen its direction, and for once I was following a road that belonged entirely to me. Emma met with her parents that afternoon, and even though I was not there, I did not need to witness the conversation to know exactly how it unfolded. Her mother called me afterward, voice steady, but carrying that unmistakable ache of someone who just watched a truth land on their child with the force of reality. She thanked me for telling them the truth and apologized for something that was never hers to apologize for. I told her gently that none of this was on them. Choices belong to the people who make them. She said Emma had broken down, trying to explain herself, stumbling over excuses that did not survive even a few minutes under the weight of what she had done. Her father, who was usually calm, had been quiet in that heavy, disappointed way that says more than shouting ever could. They told her straight that they were deeply hurt by her actions and that they stood with me not because they were choosing sides, but because truth has only one side. Hearing that surprised me, even though I should have expected it. Loyalty from the people you did not expect it from tends to hit harder than betrayal from the one you trusted most. I spent the afternoon walking through town, taking the long path past old stores and parks that had seen earlier versions of us. I was not trying to escape anything, I was just letting my mind breathe after months of tension. Every step reminded me that life keeps moving even when your personal world is shifting under your feet. I realized I was not broken, not even close. I was simply redirecting my life away from someone who had already checked out long before I noticed the door was open. When I returned home, that evening the house felt strangely silent, and I found Emma sitting at the edge of the couch, hands folded, staring at the floor. She looked up when I entered, her eyes tired and swollen from crying, but not angry, just lost, like someone who finally understood the cost of her own decisions. She said quietly, "My parents are disappointed in me," and I nodded, not to rub it in, but because it was true, and truth does not get softer just because it hurts. She asked if this was really the end, and I told her calmly, yes, it is the end of what we were, but not the end of our lives. She would find her own path eventually, one that would hopefully teach her something about loyalty and responsibility. As for me, I had already taken the first step toward rebuilding a life where my effort was matched, not taken for granted. She asked if I hated her, and I said, no, I do not hate you, I just finally understand you, and that makes all the difference. She started crying again, but quieter this time, not asking for forgiveness, not bargaining, just accepting. It reminded me that endings do not always arrive with shouting sometimes. They come with quiet clarity and two people realizing they have grown in different directions without noticing until the branches were too far apart to reach each other again. I packed a small bag that night, not because I was running away, but because the house felt like a place waiting for transition. I told her I would stay with a friend for a few days while the legal process continued, and she nodded, unable to meet my eyes. As I zipped the bag, I realized I was not sad. If anything, I felt grounded, like someone finally choosing solid ground after standing too long on unstable flooring. Before I left, she whispered, "I never thought you would actually leave," and I answered gently, "That was the problem. You thought I would stay no matter what. Love is strong, but it is not blind," and mine had finally learned to open its eyes. With that, I stepped out into the cool evening air, feeling the future settle into place like a key turning smoothly in a lock. I spent the next few days staying with my friend Daniel, a guy who had seen me pull double shifts too many times to count and never once complained when I crashed on his couch after a long night. He asked only one question when I showed up with my bag: "You ready for this?" And I said yes, because for the first time in a long time the answer was true. The quiet of his apartment gave me space to breathe, think, rebuild the pieces of myself that had been stretched thin for years. The mediator meeting came faster than expected, and when Emma and I sat across from each other, she looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally deflated, like someone who had finally realized stability is not something you can take for granted. The mediator walked us through the details calmly, and I kept my voice steady, answering everything without bitterness. Emma barely spoke beyond short acknowledgments, and when she did, her voice cracked like she was hearing the consequences in real time. In the end, the agreement was clear and fair and heavily in my favor, not because I wanted revenge, but because that is simply how the legal weight fell once her actions were factored in. She would keep a few personal items, but the house, the savings, and most of the shared assets stayed with me. She nodded through it all quietly, tears slipping down her face, but not contested, because deep down she knew this outcome was the result of her choices laid out in a straight, honest line. After it was over, she walked outside, first standing near the parking lot holding her phone like it was the only familiar thing she had left. I stepped out a moment later, and for a second we just stood there, two people who had built a life together and then taken it apart piece by piece. She whispered, "I really lost everything, didn't I?" And I answered gently, "You lost what you stopped valuing long before I noticed." It was not cruelty, just truth, the kind that lands softly but firmly. She nodded, eyes lowering, and for the first time in months, she looked at me not through distraction or guilt, but with clarity. She said, "I am sorry, I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am." I took a breath and said, "I believe you, but believing you does not mean I can stay." Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different roads, and I had already chosen mine. As I walked to my car, her parents pulled up. They had asked me to meet them afterward to check on me. And when her mother hugged me, she whispered, "You handled this with more grace than most people would." Her father shook my hand firmly, saying, "You deserve better than this, and you will find it." Hearing that from them felt like a kind of closure I did not know I needed. Driving home, I felt something unfamiliar: ease. Not excitement, not triumph, just peace, a quiet, settled certainty that I had done everything I could, and now it was time to build something new, something honest. I returned to the house, the one I had worked so hard for, and it felt different, lighter, almost like it could breathe again. In the days that followed, I fixed things around the house, cleaned, repaired, organized, not because anything was broken, but because rebuilding that space felt like rebuilding myself, each small task a step forward. People at work asked if I was all right, and I surprised myself by saying yes and meaning it fully. I was not a victim, I was not ruined, I was not lost. I was simply a man who finally stopped carrying a weight that was never his to begin with. And as strange as it sounds, the betrayal that once threatened to break me ended up becoming the sharp, clean turning point that put my life back into my own hands. Looking back now, I see it clearly. Sometimes life pushes you off a cliff just to show you you had wings the whole time. You just forgot how to use them. And I did not just survive the fall, I learned how to fly.